Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Before we begin, we'll just pause for a few minutes while we let people connect, and then we'll go over some of their housekeeping. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We do still have a few more joining, but it is getting close to time to start, so we will begin. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on Kinnections. Before we begin, I'll just go over some housekeeping regarding the GoToWebinar platform. You will see, my share screen, there we go. You will see there's a number of controls in the control panel, which will tell you where you can type your questions and how to access items. During the webinar, we'll be able to add questions via the question panel, and you can post questions at any time. We will be having time for questions at the end of the webinar. Your mics and cameras will remain off for the session. The webinar is being recorded and a copy will be made available. I would now like to introduce Dr. Rebecca Goodhue.
Thanks so much, Liz. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the various lands upon which we walk and work. For me, that's the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people here in Canberra. And I'd like to pay my sincere respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledging the ongoing contribution to society that our First Nations culture and knowledge provides. This webinar is an introduction to Kinnections, which is a wellbeing tool specifically designed for educators working with children as young as 3. And ARACY has collaborated with Kinnections because of the gap of wellbeing tools for the younger cohorts. And we're hoping to assist to build the evidence base so that even more children and families can get the help that they need. We're pleased to be joined by Josh Vaughan and Caitlin Williams today. And first up, we're going to hear from Josh, who is the CEO and founder of Kinnections. Josh is a teacher with over 20 years experience in both education and community settings, as well as the CEO and co-founder of The Right Direction Australia, which is a charity focusing on the relationships between fathers and sons. Josh founded Kinnections when his experience led to him realizing that due to the young age, so many young children who are experiencing a decline in their well-being are flying under the radar. So over to you. Welcome, Josh.
Thanks very much, Bex, and thank you for doing the acknowledgement. And good afternoon to everyone who is joining us today. I think it's important, first of all, just to share that who is this guy on your screen, and we'll lead into a little bit about what the Kinnections platform is. My all experience of ranging over 20 years now, 16 years was spent within the education sector. And I count myself very lucky in that not only undertaking what I think is one of the most important roles in society as working with young people in schools, but I also had the experience of working within the early childhood sector, primary school settings, high school settings and college. So where I count myself lucky is that I've really been involved with children from as young as 6 weeks of age all the way up to 18, topping out in the college years. The last 6 years of my experience, I moved out of the education sector and moved into the community sector. And it was there that I was overseeing and looking after programs specifically focusing on youth and adult mental health, homelessness, alcohol and drugs, family services, as well as justice programs. And from the outset, when I started in the community sector, not knowing a lot about it, to be honest, I was mixing with the young people who were accessing our programs. And for the most part, the therapeutic programs, And it was made very, very clear very early around the crisis that we were facing around the declining mental health and wellbeing of our young people, but also compounded by the fact that accessing services was so difficult due to wait lists, capacity, access just generally, and all those issues. And what I found was that when I was mixing with the young people who were accessing our programs, it became very, very clear to me quickly that for the majority, they were reporting back to me in our conversations that they truly understood and could recall when things for them or their situations started going south. And it was around those particular times that they found it very hard for support and gaining support, largely due to not having really strong connections with key people, and that they really needed hand holding to navigate the system, which can be very confusing for a young person. And those really early interactions have really stuck with me. So what I did was I went and actively sought out to have conversations with a lot of my colleagues and peers working within the community sector. And this included a whole range of people from youth workers, support workers, counsellors, social workers, psychologists, and even paediatricians who I was linked to. And I was really looking for their input because I had a few questions and I wanted to gain their insight about what are some of the absolute key questions that we could ask so that we could build a better understanding and even create a better picture of well-being, and that would provide us with the early signs and hopefully a bit of evidence that they're in need of support. And there was 4 themes that really stood out, and those 4 themes were for one, are you connected? Are you connected? With who are you connected? And what does that connection look like? Second theme really was, what are you hopeful for? You know, what are you looking forward to? Do you have a positive future focus? And in so much as, do you wake up every day and are you looking forward to something? Third theme, very, very early on in the piece, and incredibly important, was around safety and the sense of safety. And then fourth, or for lastly in this instance, was tell me how you're feeling right now. You know, what are you experiencing? So I can gain sort of a point in time information. So my interest was really spiked early on. So the next step that I did was I undertook a literature review. I wanted to explore the 4 themes that I was learning about very quickly. I wanted to check the research and the evidence that was available. And in doing so, I was more and more satisfied with these 4 areas, were key indicators, and they really could provide some really, really important information about young people in particular that would help with intervention as early as possible. And essentially, that's where Kinnections was born. So I then went about and with the help of a technical team, of course, I built the prototype, and I've embedded the 4 questions into the platform. As Caitlin presents following this one, she's going to go into a little bit more detail, obviously, about the use in schools. But the 4 questions that remain on the platform and within the app around, the first one is around the connection, and it's ascertaining or asking the young person to tell us of 3 friends that you feel really connected to. 3 of your close mates. Who would you like to sit next to? Who do you enjoy playing with? The research is clear that connections to others is vital for all people because it contributes to their emotional well-being, social skill development, personal growth, their support system, and opportunities for collaboration and learning. Nurturing positive connections helps young individuals thrive and navigate the challenges of adolescence and beyond. This rings clear every day for me, and particularly as I'm becoming more and more interested and addicted to alone. I'm not going to ask for a virtual hand up, but I'm hoping, or I'm sure there's a number of you here today who are watching alone. And it's becoming abundantly clear why people leave. and a lot of that is directly associated with their lack of connection and that need to be around other people. The people who form positive relationships are more likely to thrive. Again, this is all backed up by evidence. Loneliness, communication difficulties, or social isolation put people at greater risk of mental illness. And having positive relationships is a sign of good mental health, and that's backed up with a direct quote from the World Health Organization. Second question that we ask is the safety question. Is there something that the student is looking forward to? In a study, again through the research we've done, there was a study that assessed the influence of 4 different models on depressing systems in adolescence, and it was found that positive outlook was the strongest predictor for change in the severity of depressive order, and that was over a course of 36 weeks. In this study, positive outlook was defined as a positive future focus and positive views of oneself and the world. And the findings from the study suggested that monitoring the positivity of a young person's outlook could offer a really useful indicator of their mental health status. Positive future focus occurs when an individual is optimistic, hopeful, and looks forward to their future with positivity. And the positive future focus is understood as both an indicator as well as a protective factor for mental health. The third question, again, is around the safety. And we ask the young person, have you felt unsafe recently? And we've devised that question and offering four responses that we can track carefully and monitor. And the young person can feed back to us if, when asked the question, have you felt unsafe recently, the responses are never, sometimes, often, or mostly. And ultimately, if we're hearing a young person telling us they feel unsafe, it's a red flag, because the sense of safety is of utmost importance, as it directly affects the emotional well-being, it affects healthy development, it affects learning, not only young people, but all of us. It affects our relationships, our personal autonomy, and it protects us from harm. And the creation of a safe environment for young individuals supports their overall growth and enabling them to thrive and reach their full potential. Educators, again, I don't need to sort of harp on this one too much, but there's clear links around safety, particularly as mandatory reporters, and the need that we need to listen to children and ensure that they are feeling safe. And the last question that we ask is around how that student is feeling at that point of time. This is an easily trackable measure. It's simply reported back to the educator from the young person, and it can prompt immediate responses if required. You're telling me you're sad right now. What is it that's making you sad? Or you're telling me you're really happy. That's great. What are you looking forward to? So what I would like to do is go through the slides in a moment, and I'll just show you what they actually look like, and talk you through as I'm going through. So Liz, can I just get a bit of a confirmation that you can see that okay?
Yes, Josh, we can see your presentation view.
Wonderful, thank you. So the Kinnections app is accessible to educators and schools and early childhood centres who have logged in with us, and we have that relationship. You are provided with a unique school code, which ensures your privacy and confidentiality of all that's held within the app. And logins are through allocated emails, work emails, and passwords. After we log in from the app, there's the classes that are associated with that educator. So only the classroom teacher or the classroom leader has access to their class and their students. Educators set up the frequency of what they want to undertake or how they want to undertake the Kinnections conversations. We would love, and we have the functionality for Kinnections conversations to happen weekly. The choice is entirely up to you, the user. You can have them fortnightly, monthly, bi-monthly. It really is your choice. But again, the functionality is there that you can undertake these every week. So the teacher then has access to the list of students. And for this information, or for today, I've got Anna Johnson in front of me, and I've selected Anna Johnson's name, who has appeared on the pop-up list within the app. And we go about asking the questions. So I'm asking Anna the first question, and the educator simply taps on the names of those other 3 connections that Anna has provided to me. Second question is around the positivity and the sense of hope, or the positive future focus. I ask Anna, are you looking forward to something? And she responds to me, yes, I'm looking forward to the weekend. I'm playing netball, or I'm catching up with friends. I'm going to the movies. The evidence of the research tells us the positive future focus can be the smallest of things as long as they have one. So in this case, Anna says, yes, I'm looking forward to something. Or if they can't talk about a positive thing, we record that as a no at this time. Third question is around the safety again. So again, I'm asking Anna, how is she feeling unsafe at any period over the last week? And the responses that we're looking from her are never, sometimes, often, and mostly. And the fourth question, very simple question, is, hey Anna, tell me how you're feeling right now. Again, Caitlin will go into a little bit of this detail, but the information received and the feedback directly from Caitlin's school was that they would like the emoji scale because of its simplicity, and we were happy to do that. So the three choices there in front of you, really I'm feeling a bit sad, I'm in the middle, or I'm feeling pretty good. And that's as simple as the conversation. It's quick and easy, and it's available on a mobile device. So it can happen in the classroom, one-on-one, it can happen in the playground, it can happen in bus duty, wherever you wish. Next, I'll show you quickly is what the platform looks like, where that you can draw down a little bit more on the information that we're collecting via those connections conversations. Again, the login page is a secure web login available only to the school or the centre. The dashboard that you're introduced to after logging in contains overarching but really important information based on your students in your class or the class you're allocated to. There is the general wellbeing that is tracking that general response for you, and in the image you can see there today, that's an averaged general wellbeing chart, and you can draw down again on weeks, on terms, even on years. The image at the bottom there, that's just showing you the future focus responses, how many students of the week are telling you that they have a positive future focus. Conversely, how many students are telling you that they don't at this time. Administrators, so a school appointed administrator, which can be a wellbeing coordinator, pastoral coordinator, assistant principal, choice of the school. They have additional functionality where they can access the details of the teachers they have within the platform, and they can add, delete, change, add classes as such. For the teacher, this is where you start drawing down on the individual student's information. And you can look at the students either as lists or tiles. That's just the aesthetics really, but it has all your students listed with all of the information available. Drawing down on the specific information, we see the student's name, we see the class they're assigned to, we're tracking their close friends and their connections, which I'll show you in the next slide. We also have accessible to the individual responses that they're sharing with you as you take the connections conversations. We have a notes facility in there for case noting, and we're also tracking their general wellbeing journey. So you can see there that with Mia, you can see that generally she's pretty good, but it's a key indicator of that if we can see there's a change or a significant drop in her wellbeing, we can intervene early. This particular function we're pretty excited about because it's tracking those friendships and those connections, which is really important for schools. Here, we have the two columns. So we not only track the connections that Anna is identifying as a close friend who she feels a strong connection to, but we're also tracking the students or Anna's peers who are choosing her. So we've got immediate access to finding where the true friends are or her true connections are. But the new addition that we're adding to this one, which we're hoping to have available very soon, is that we're creating what will be a connections web. And I think the best way to describe that one is similar to a word cloud, where we'll have the young person in the center of the cloud or the web, but we'll be able to demonstrate visually very quickly who the connections are, and I guess the power or the strength of that connection as well. Teachers also have access to their individual classes where they can manipulate the data, add students and such. Also, an additional to the platform is that we're giving to you your own survey tool. And this one is similar to a SurveyMonkey example, but you are the owner of the information, you create the questions you want to ask, and you send out the surveys to who you want to send them to. We can choose different response types to the questions, which, pardon me, include yes/no responses, a true or false response. You can allocate a multiple choice with a single answer, or a multiple choice with a number of answers, a short answer, or an essay form. And again, you create what you want to ask and you share it with who. And then the survey tool generator supports you to build a survey, provide the information as far as introduction to what the survey is, but it also allows you access to reports. And the reports that you get can be visual charts, verbal responses from the short answer and the essays as such. So this is really, really important, and we think a valuable tool for every school. Also, within the app is obviously where you access the weekly reports or the Kinnections conversations reports. And they will tell you from the week or the month or the fortnight that you're undertaking those conversations, they will list to you the students who, importantly, as those connection conversations are happening, it will highlight the students who aren't being picked. So what we're doing is we're really drawing from the reads or from under the radar the young people who could be feeling potentially isolated or disconnected because none of their peers are identifying them as a strong connection. So there is a list in front of the educator straight away that demonstrates we need to keep a bit of a closer eye on this young person. The reports also demonstrate the children who are telling us that no, they don't have a positive future focus at this moment. For the safety aspect, it's telling us, the students who are telling us that they're feeling unsafe mostly or all the time, and we track those very closely. And we're also being reported back the young people who tell us they're feeling pretty sad at the moment. So again, the report is front of face and really important tracking and monitoring tool. We've linked Kinnections to our theory of change, where again, this is really our driving piece about why we want to do Kinnections, the impact and the influence that we want to have to support schools, to support early childhood centres in supporting young people. We also have on our website a number of articles where we're building a library of tools and resources. And this article in particular is just sharing, based on our research and findings, why preschools and primary schools are really key environments for early intervention and improving students' mental health. A little bit of a final blurb for me. Again, I think I'm preaching to the converted already, but we know that engaging with young people early is crucial for them, and the early interventions are customised to what they need early before their situations deteriorate. And I think one of the big selling points for that is that we actually give, by using the tool, we provide children that voice to share within their feelings, their emotions, and their experiences. So Liz, if you're happy to shut down that slideshow for me, please. And I'll hand back to you, Bex.
Thanks so much, Josh. That was a wonderful overview, and I feel like I'm reading a report every week around the impacts of loneliness on, physical health, mental health, emotional health. So it's brilliant that this tool exists. We will have time for questions later, but for our audience, please feel free to send through any questions you have for Josh, and we'll get to them after the next speaker, who is Caitlin Williams. So Caitlin's here to share with us her experience of using Kinnections as an educator in a primary school setting. So Caitlin is a Year 4 teacher, as well as holding the position of wellbeing coordinator at St Michael's Primary School in Meadowbank. Welcome, Caitlin.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's a pleasure to be here. So I really appreciate that introduction, Rebecca, and thank you to Josh and Liz for giving me the opportunity to take part in this webinar presentation today, which is all about Kinnections. I'm very privileged to be providing an insight of what Kinnections looks like more from an educational standpoint. And so what I will do now is share my screen and pop my presentation up. So just confirming, Liz, can my presentation be seen right now?
Yep, we've got it. Thanks, Caitlin.
Beautiful, awesome. So I think as Rebecca just discussed, we looked a little bit about who I am, and so there's a bit of an introduction about me here. So I am currently a Year 4 teacher at St Michael's Catholic Primary School, Meadowbank, and this is my 3rd year teaching Year 4, and I've recently been appointed the wellbeing coordinator at my school as well, which is a massive privilege for me. So I've definitely experienced firsthand the benefits of Kinnections in my classroom setting, and I've had the privilege to be working with Josh over, I think, the last year to really implement this in our school. So today I'm sharing about what Kinnections looks like from a school perspective, specifically focusing on my school, some of the wins that we've had, and just how amazing this platform has been for us. So I'll get started first with how we do use Kinnections and what this looks like at St Michael's. So all classroom teachers have access to the Kinnections app, and our goal is to then create a new survey to enter our data. Like Josh mentioned before, which I'll get into in a moment, we look at those 4 main questions that we survey our children on, and they stay consistent each time we survey. So a wellbeing check-in is completed at the moment once a term, and I think the goal would be in the future to do that more consistently, but as we're slowly introducing this into our school, it's a great place to start. So as teachers, we can then use this data to inform our future practice. So the main questions which Josh did mention before focus on these 4 main values being connection, future focus, safety, and general wellbeing. And I won't get into exactly what those questions are because I think Josh covered that really well. But the main reason I also thought of mentioning what these questions are was mainly because I know that Josh is really good in taking on feedback and looking at the best way to look at how things have been going with our survey and make some adjustments so that it is the most accurate data we can get. So one example was, like mentioned before, when it came to that question about general wellbeing, having the option for emojis or a scale of 1 to 10 for our more upper grade students so that it was relevant to them. The other change that Josh made as well when it came to our surveys was ensuring that students could select connections that they had amongst the whole grade, because I know that often you'll do it within a class setting, and what we're finding is that sometimes, you know, students often have connections in the other class as well. So that was a great change that occurred, and students were more than happy to identify those connections amongst the grade, and it just made sure that the data that we were collecting was a lot more reliable and accurate. So moving on to why we love Kinnections. So it was hard to kind of articulate this in a small amount here because I'm really excited to talk about Kinnections as a platform. So one of the things I mentioned was helping to normalise conversations around mental health, which I'm sure most of you would know already and would have noticed, but I think after the pandemic, this became a lot more important. I think it was always important, but it really highlighted the importance of having conversations about mental health, particularly with our younger students. And I know from personal experience, having taught Year 4 the last few years, I've definitely noticed that my current group of students are a lot more, there's a bit more of an emotional dependency there where they do need more of a connection there after what's been a really challenging few years. So having this platform introduced came at the absolute perfect time. It also allows us to check in with students regularly, helping us to identify students who may not actually have connections with their peers, and also in terms of the safety aspect, also highlighting students who could potentially be at risk. And I think that often we are so busy as teachers that there are so many things going on, and we often don't really have time to have that one-on-one check-in with our students because life gets so busy and there's so much happening. So it's so amazing to almost have this embedded as part of our compliance and part of our practice that we do, that we have the opportunity to check in one-on-one with our students, and potentially, not that we want students at risk, but if there are any students at risk, we have the chance to highlight those early on and do something about it. It also gives us data that supports any concerns we have for students. We know often if we have a bit of an instinct as teachers where we might identify a student that there might be a concern there, but this also kind of backs up those concerns and gives us data to support this, especially if there is something quite concerning that might be highlighted in terms of safety, that we have the data to really help us support what we're noticing. And the last thing I mentioned on this slide was also that it's very quick to survey students because Things that are time consuming are often very overwhelming. The workload is always increasing and it does become quite overwhelming. So I love that, especially with Kinnections, how quick it is to survey students. Like Josh showed us before, the questions are very straightforward. It doesn't take long at all. I know that I've got a class of 31 students and I can often get that done in, while the students might be reading silently or finding times during the day where it doesn't really, take away from learning time, but we're also getting it done quite quickly. That way it's not becoming something added on that's time consuming. So moving on to what Kinnections has taught us as a school, and I think, as I mentioned before, the importance of student wellbeing, especially after the pandemic, and the fact that we don't really check in with our students enough on an individual basis, as I touched on before. I think really that wellbeing comes at the forefront of everything, and if students aren't feeling happy and wanting to be at school and they don't feel safe, then none of that learning can really occur. So this really just highlights to us the importance of wellbeing. I also mentioned here that students might be experiencing some social challenges that we're unaware of, and by having that small conversation with them and tracking that information, it does really highlight these challenges they might be having that we might not have known. I can't be on the playground 24/7 to be aware of any social challenges that students are experiencing. So having this conversation might just, identify if there's students that are, having those challenges, that we can kind of get to the bottom of that. Wellbeing check-ins are as valuable, if not more, as testing students on their learning. I think we're always pre-testing and assessing students and constantly tracking their data for their learning, but very rarely do we have the opportunity to track this for wellbeing as well. So I think that really this should be something that is prioritised in every school, and I think that would be the ideal. I'm sure Josh is very would think that as well, that we really want this to be something that it comes first, because I think without that well-being and that support, then the learning, it's very difficult for that to occur. And the last thing here was that how amazing the platform is that it also will highlight if students are missing Kinnections, and it does it in a way where you don't have to search for any data. It's very highlighted for you, and the way the data is collected and presented, it will then show you those students who haven't had any other students identify them as a connection, and we can then work from there. So just something here that I kind of thought really highlights the importance of Kinnections, and it's that when our students feel safe, happy and connected, as teachers, we can see the positive impact this has on their learning. I know that personally as adults too, is that if I'm not feeling happy, or if I'm not feeling safe, it's very hard for me to be productive in my work as well. And it's the same with our young students too, that without feeling those feelings, it's very hard for that learning to occur, which I think is a common theme throughout this. So what are our students saying? I think it's important to look at how are the students feeling about this survey, because obviously sometimes students might feel a little bit nervous when it comes to tests, but I think it doesn't really come across that way when it comes to Kinnections. So I recently conducted a survey on my own Year 4 class, and this survey showed that 100% of my students enjoyed their Kinnections conversation. So they all said yes to this, and that they really enjoy that time connecting with me and looking at their well-being. So these were just some of the responses that the students wrote when it came to what they enjoy most about Kinnections. So I'll read some of those out. So one-on-one time with my teacher gets to know me better. Miss Williams makes sure I am okay. I like that someone talks to me about how my day is. It helps me feel better. I can be honest with Miss Williams. I have someone to talk to, and my teacher helps me when times are down. So I think for them to be so self-aware of the impact that Kinnections has, especially when we're only introducing it over, once a term at the moment, they're already seeing that impact and looking forward to that check-in, which I think is incredible. And on the other side, these are what our teachers are currently saying, as Kinnections is a relatively new thing in our school and we're getting used to that. So 2 in 3 teachers strongly agree that their knowledge of students has improved with the assistance of Kinnections. They strongly believe that the students understand why Kinnections is important. And some responses from the teachers with the best aspects of Kinnections are how quick it is, very simple to click on the buttons within the app rather than typing. So I think it's so quick and functional for teachers, supporting the opportunity to check in regularly and better appreciate individual circumstances, and also tracking Kinnections is simple and easy to understand. So that was just some of our feedback from our teachers. And One thing I wanted to share was a success story one of the teachers told me, who happened to also be on our wellbeing team at our school, and she shared this story with me, which I thought was really sweet. So being a kindergarten teacher and completing these wellbeing check-ins on Kinnections, she noticed that 2 students in kindergarten were missing Kinnections. So no one was choosing them as a connection, and they were struggling on the playground, and obviously being such an important time in their schooling, you know, their first year of proper more formalized schooling, that's so important. So noticing that these students both had missing Kinnections, she encouraged the students to then form a friendship because of this data, and these students ended up becoming friends and had a connection then when it came to their break times and their recess and lunch because of this Kinnections app. So had she not completed the app and the survey and the data, she wouldn't have noticed these 2 students missing those connections and wouldn't have been able to kind of create a friendship out of that, which was very successful. So I think that's a beautiful thing to look at. And that pretty much is the end of my presentation. I might hand back over to Beck.
Thank you, Caitlin. It's so great to hear about it being used in real life, in a real, you know, sometimes crazy situation in what we've got in schools these days. So we've got a few questions coming in. Please do type in any more questions if you would like to ask either Josh or Caitlin. So I'm gonna, there's a few that are in similar themes, so I'm gonna bunch them together and start with Josh in clarifying what the age is for Kinnections, how young and how old.
Thanks, Beck. So yes, we specifically target the younger years, and through a lot of consultation, particularly with ARACY as well, and providing some really great advice on this one, because the Kinnections app is unique within what can be considered a little bit of a crowded market with other wellbeing apps and tools. The uniqueness of having the teacher lead the conversation and actually capture the responses that are coming back lends it to be available for the younger cohort. So we're really focusing on children from as young as 3 years of age, in so much that they can respond with a little bit of support and potential a little bit of scaffolding around a deeper understanding around the questions. So we're looking from 3, and we're really trying to fall within the range of senior upper primary, so around the 12 years of age. But what we're doing, particularly with ARACY, is we're now focusing on a cohort where that, and Beck, so please, you can probably talk a little bit more about this too, but we're really looking on the cohort between the 3 to 7 or 3 to 8 year olds, where we haven't really had a lot of access to data and information about the wellbeing.
Great, thank you. And in that theme, is there a different user face for use by educators in early learning services and school age services?
No, we've kept the same interface, and that's around consistency. So through the testing, through the early testing and design, the database or the actual face of the app is as simple as we can make that. And again, I take that from my own experience of a teacher, where you need to access the information fast. It's available on all mobile devices. So we're available through Android and through iPhone, so you can access it on Samsung, iPads, mobile phones as such. But the actual interface and the interaction with the app and the desktop remains the same.
Great, thank you. One for you, Caitlin. So you spoke about the survey, but that was different to the check-in tool. And so there's a question around clarifying the 4-question check-in and the survey that you did around how the children actually found the Kinnections conversations.
Awesome. So that's, yeah, so I think Josh helped me actually create that survey to have a bit of data to back up what we were talking about in today's webinar. So the typical interface that Josh was talking about before is the 4 questions that we would ask students each time, which I may have referred to as the survey as well, so there could have been a little bit of confusion there too. But that specific survey to collect data about the students was constructed by Josh. But correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, were you talking about before the ability to also create surveys within the Kinnections platform if you wanted to create your own questions too?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the survey tool that is available within the platform. So again, just touching a little bit on that, there's two parts to the survey tool. The first part is actually deciding and creating the questions that you want to ask. And the questions are unlimited. It's just really unlimited to your own imagination and drawing down on the information you would like to receive back from the young people, the students. And again, they're questions that can be designed as a yes/no response, a true or false, a multiple choice, a short answer, and a long answer. So you create the questions you want, then you build them into your own unique survey that has its own secure web link or address, and then the school uses that web link in whatever purpose they need. It can be embedded in newsletters. It can be sent out individually through emails to students if they have allocated student emails. And again, not so much for the younger students, but absolutely for the older students who are a bit more tech savvy. It can go out to parents. It can go out to carers. You can even create surveys that go out wider with the permission of your school to create information night. You can feed back on maybe some programs that you're using within the school and you want to generate some feedback about a program. By all means, ask about the program, seek the teacher's input, seek the students' input. This is giving everyone within your community the voice to share their experiences and their feedback about what's happening within your school or centre.
Thank you. And I think that's an important point to emphasise, is that survey can be created not just for the kids themselves, but for teachers and or parents, which is, you know, hugely powerful. We've got heaps of questions coming in, guys. There's a question around, is this tool only able to be used during term time? What happens during school summer holidays?
Again, ultimately flexible. What we have done though is, because there is an inconsistency across the term dates nationally. So Western Australian term dates don't align with New South Wales, that don't align with Tasmania, and the story goes on. So what we've done is we've actually created a link within the platform where we've basically aligned terms by their dates only for consistency purposes. But if you want to create your own survey on your own time, then that is entirely up to you. And you can call it whatever you want. You can date stamp it whatever you want. You can date it as a summer holiday. It's just entirely up to you. And that's where the actual survey tool is so flexible in its delivery.
Excellent. And throw this one to you first, Caitlin. How would you modify the 4 questions to suit 3-year-olds?
Well, I think that, like Josh said before, it'd be more about how you almost explain the question to 3-year-olds. Now, I don't have as much experience with 3-year-olds, having year 4 class at the moment. I'm mostly working with 9 and 10-year-olds, but I know that in a kindergarten setting, like Josh mentioned before, for example, with how do you feel, I think it's this week or recently, there's a bit of an emoji option where it's a bit more visual for students. Or I think that, you know, let's say you're asking the question in terms of, you know, who are your current connections or people you like to play with. It'd be just more about how you almost framed it to the students to still get the same information, but by saying it in a way that they would understand. And I think that educators would know the best way to speak to their students and to convey that to them to get the information that they're asking for. It could be, you know, who, I think, you know, with younger kids, it might just be like, who do you like to play with at the moment? Or tell me people that are your friends right now, and you're just trying to kind of get that information. Whereas in a year 4 classroom, for example, I might say, tell me 3 students that you like to spend time with right now. And they'll know that by me saying that, exactly what I mean. When it comes to those 3 years, I think, like Josh said, it's having to have those modifications, which can be done within the interface, especially with that emoji modification, for example, instead of 1 to 10. And also just the way that, I guess, you explain it to the kids, that you know them the best and you'll be able to explain it in a way that makes sense to them. I hope that kind of clarifies what the question.
Thank you. Josh, did you want to add to that?
Oh, only that only that Caitlin's absolutely right. For the first question, we want to know who the young person feels as a friend and they'd go to talk to, or they invite to play a game with. So it's as simple as that. In an early childhood setting, in a room base or whatever, it'd be a case of having that one person one-on-one and saying, hey, point to the 3 people in the room who you love playing with, or who do you know 3 people that like the same things that you do. And again, the really important part around this is that the information we want to capture are 3 connections. How you ask the question is up to the educator's relationship with the young person. And they will know, and you will know exactly what you need to ask to get that information. For the second question, the positive future focus, tell me something that you're really, really excited about. Or if there's something you wake up every day, what makes you smile for a young person? And they'll tell you. It could be Weet-Bix. It could be I'm watching Bluey on the TV. Again, what is important is that they can tell you and they can feed back to you that, yes, I wake up and I'm actually excited about something that's happening, and it's something that's on my radar that I'm looking forward to. So it's the skill of the educator, and you're experts. Educators are subject matter experts about their young people, and they will be able to draw the information they need to capture those responses.
Thank you. Another question here asking if could the tool be made available to students to self-assess?
Yes.
So again, a lot of time and thought went into Kinnections and what we want to do. There are a myriad of other wellbeing apps out there, and they're all great, and they all have their place for their specific reasons and purposes. Kinnections is designed for the educator to have that one-on-one conversation. 2 reasons really. It's to obviously to evidence or gain information data about what we know to be 4 really key indicators of mental health and well-being. But the actual benefit of the Kinnections conversation is the rapport building between the educator and the young person, and the trust that you have, and the knowledge that you are learning every time you have these conversations with young people. We know that these conversations are happening and have been happening with young people forever. What I just wanted to be able to make easier for early childhood environments and primary schools for us to capture the responses that are these wellbeing big ticket items that give us the evidence we need. So Kinnections is really driven by the educator for a very, very important reason.
And I'd add that from an ARACY perspective, we know that a relational approach to wellbeing is hugely important, and a technologically based approach needs to be paired with a relational approach, which is what Kinnections is doing inherently. Okay, next question is around consultation to ensure the questions are appropriate for children as young as 3. I know you did mention this in your presentation, Josh, but is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Oh, only that, yeah, again, a lot of feedback. I saw a lot of feedback on this one, and again, I don't claim to be an expert, but I do know there are people who study brain science, the psychologists and the pediatricians, and then I went looking for the actual research on that. And again, the formulation of the questions is really just a chance to get the information that we need, which are indicators of wellbeing and mental health. So they are evidence-based, they're backed by evidence, and they're quite thought through, again, that they are quick and they're easy, but they provide really important information.
Thank you. We've probably only got time for a couple more. So one more for you, Caitlin, is around how to find the time to do this in an already busy setting, education setting.
Yes, I had a feeling this would come up because I think that the one thing as a teacher is there's so much to already do. So where do you kind of find the time to do this? Look, I think that with it, as important as it is, we always find time to add extra testing when we get that sprung on us that is so time consuming, and we just find a way to do it. I think when it comes to Kinnections, I know that one of the standards, you know, the 8th standards of teachers, the first one is to know your students and how they learn. And I think that if you don't know your students, then you won't know how they learn, because it's firstly about the connections that you have with them as well as the teacher. So I think that when it comes to a bit of a time management standpoint, I know that between myself and my grade partner, for example, we might do a bit of like a team teaching or something and say, okay, well, you know, one teacher supervises the class, you might get one teacher to kind of pull some kids out and do a bit of a check-in with them, and then we might kind of tag team, or it could be at times where students don't require significant support. I know that that might be a bit easier from an upper grade teacher perspective. I know that when it comes to infants, I feel like it's very hard to find a bit of a moment. So when it comes to the upper grades, if my students might be doing some silent reading or doing things that don't really require me to be sitting with them and supporting them, that's a great time for me to do it. And it really does not take very long. It's very much a who are three, you know, people that you like spending time with right now, bang, 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 you put it down, you ask your next few questions, and within almost less than a minute, you've ticked one of those students off already. And I think that as time goes on, they start to know what the survey questions are. So they already have in their mind, doing our connections check-in, they're thinking about those 3 students before they even come to you. And I'm sure that, you know, in the lower grades too, they probably will become familiar with it after you do it for the first time. I'm not sure if it could be, you know, I don't think it's as easy as maybe giving it to like a support teacher or something if you have that privilege in your classroom, because you really want the data for yourself and you want to have that time to check in with your students. But I think that if we know how important it is, we can make time for it, and it's a matter of just being strategic about what that looks like in your setting. For me, being that, you know, year 4 teacher, it might be when my students might be reading or doing something where they don't require my full attention, where I can just do a bit of check-ins there. But for you, that might look different. It depends on what your situation is and what your setting looks like. But I do feel that, you know, if we can get testing done when it comes to the learning aspect and math testing and you know, testing students on their reading, which is so time consuming, then we can find time for a really quick check-in like this that could do wonders. And I know what students like when they come in from the playground, if they've had a social issue, for example, that you end up spending half an hour with that child trying to calm them down and no learning gets done in that time, that if we have a platform that lets us check in with those students prior to that and almost helping stop potential issues in the future, we're almost doing ourselves a favour in advance, if that kind of makes sense.
Yes, it makes total sense. Thank you, Caitlin. And we know that if children don't have their wellbeing considered and supported, then they're not going to be learning to their best potential. So I really second your point around if we can make time to test with other, you know, maths or reading, I hope we can check in for wellbeing. A nice simple one for you, Josh. How do schools sign up? That is a real life question. I'm not making it up.
Oh, thanks, Bex. We have our website where you can access through the website. The quickest and easiest way is to contact us through the email, and I'm sure we'll make that available with the recording, which will be, but it's info@kinnections.com.au. You can find us on our website, but please, yeah, make contact that way.
Excellent, thank you. Last comments I'm going to throw to both of you for any final comments, and then we'll wrap up. Caitlin, anything else you'd like to say?
I think I'll just end in saying that, you know, wellbeing is hopefully one of those things that will become more prioritised in schools, and I think we're starting to see that movement occur. So making a small change like this will make a big impact in the future for our kids if they're more aware of how they're feeling in their mental health. We know that without that understanding of mental health, that can cause significant issues down the track. And I think that I know personally, if I had a tool like this when I was younger, it could have helped me be more self-aware of my own mental health when I was younger and not have to kind of go through that as much as I am older, because I know that people would wish they had this same opportunity when they're younger. And those conversations and normalizing conversations around mental health is something that if we're doing that with our younger students, we really are changing the future in our, you know, younger generations in being able to be more self-aware of their mental health. And I think that this is a really good starting point.
Thank you. And I think that's a super important point that you made, is that this is not just around checking in at that moment in time for wellbeing for these kids. It's actually building capacity and understanding around what is wellbeing and what is important in understanding what's going on for me. So thank you for making that point. Josh, final words?
Well, aside from thanking Caitlin for filling my bucket, because this is exactly the information that I love to hear. I mean, Kinnections is a passion piece, and it's from my experience in schools. It's my experience in the community sector, and it's my experience working with young people who are really struggling and wanting to get in front of that. I'd like to leave with 4 very quick things. The first thing is that Kinnections is evidence and experience based. We've spent a lot of time around the importance of asking these questions, and I was a teacher, and I know that for most children, schools and classroom settings are some of the safest and consistent settings that they have. So this is the big opportunity to get in touch and learn about them. Second point is that they're quick. The biggest pushback we have is, oh, another administrative task, we're overloaded already. I 100% agree that teachers are overloaded, but this is quick, and it was designed in that way that it was to try and save you as much time as you can, and gather really, really important information about young people. Thirdly, the information and the data that is captured, it's tracked and reported. It's really important information, and it assists with painting not only the individual picture of the children that you're looking after, but we can filter down now and around and sideways, and we can draw down on ages, on genders, on cohorts. We can even start looking at geographical areas and postcodes. And this is what's informing practice. And this is the link with ARACY as well, and helping to ensure that what we're doing in schools around the supporting of young people and their well-being is evolving, and it's improving, and we're helping in the care and attention to young people. And lastly is that this Kinnections tool, it really does give your children and your students a voice. Caitlin touched on the 8 SOAR requirements that you have around engaging. I know, well, I'm assuming that you're all very aware of the Australian Child Safe standards and frameworks, where this stuff is so important, where we have to ensure that the safety of children is being tracked and it's being monitored. And if anything, Kinnections will provide that opportunity for you, where you can absolutely evidence that you're checking in on children's safety, you're ensuring that things are being done when they're telling you that they're not safe. So I just encourage you to try it. The feedback we're getting is positive. It's always positive. I'm not making that up, but it's designed specifically to help you help your young people.
Brilliant, thank you. And thank you so much for taking the time to do this today, Caitlin and Josh. And thank you to everyone who joined us today or who is watching the recording. If you haven't already, please do sign up to receive the ARACY newsletters. It's a free weekly newsletter, and that's where you'll see the link to the recording and any of our future webinars. And we'll now bring this event to a close. So thank you again, and hope to see you at our next